Hey, I'm Robin. Life as a financial analyst isn't exactly a cakewalk, more like a marathon of meetings, endless analyses, and always being glued to my phone and laptop. Cooking? Never been my thing, so thank heavens for the little bakery just down the street from my office. Mrs. Thompson, the saleswoman, must be pushing 60, but she's got energy that could light up the city. We hit it off from day one. She's the kind of lady who knows everyone by name and treats her customers like family. I guess you could say she became a sort of friend. One particularly chaotic Wednesday, I dashed into the bakery, desperate for a decent meal after back-to-back meetings had me missing lunch. The bell chimed as I pushed through the door, and there she was behind the counter, flashing her familiar warm smile. "Hey, Robin. The usual?" Mrs. Thompson called out as I approached, her voice cutting through the hum of other customers. "Yeah, that'd be great, Mrs. T," I replied, trying to return her smile but feeling the weight of the day pulling it down. "What's new with you?" "Oh, just the usual. But hey, speaking of new." She leaned closer, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "My son Tom's back in town. Handsome, just like his father was, God rest his soul, and single too. You should meet him, Robin. Just dinner. What do you say?" I hesitated, the idea of dating hadn't crossed my mind in ages, but Mrs. Thompson wasn't the type to give up easily. "All right, okay. Dinner. Why not?" "Great. He's here on Saturday. I'll tell him to meet you here at the bakery, say around 7? Her grin was infectious. Paying for my meal, I couldn't help but smile genuinely this time. Mrs. Thompson had a way of making you feel like everything was going to be okay. That Saturday, feeling a mix of curiosity and trepidation, I walked into the bakery. The smell of freshly baked bread calmed my nerves a bit. Tom was already there, sitting at a corner table. He stood as I approached, his smile easy and welcoming. "Robin, right? I'm Tom. Mom has told me so much about you," he greeted, his voice warm. We talked over dinner, and it was surprisingly easy. Tom was funny in a dry kind of way and listened more than he spoke, which was refreshing. By the time the evening ended, I found myself agreeing to see him again. No expectations, no pressure, just open to possibilities. Life after Tom and I started dating was like stepping into a calm after a relentless storm. It's funny how fast things moved, from casual dinners at that bakery to him throwing around words like forever and together. His mom, Mrs. Thompson, took to calling me her daughter right off the bat, which was endearing at first. A year zipped by, and next thing I knew, I was walking down the aisle with Tom, saying "I do" in a modest city hall ceremony. We settled into my tiny one-bedroom apartment right after the wedding. Cramped? Sure, but it was ours. Tom didn't mind the size, he said it felt cozy, like a love nest just for the two of us. His positivity was one of the things that made me fall for him. But life had a twist waiting just around the corner. My grandmother, the rock of my life, passed away unexpectedly. The grief was sudden and sharp, but in her will, she left me her house, a sprawling place that seemed too big for just Tom and me. At the funeral, Mrs. Thompson, eyes wide as she took in the grand old house, leaned over and whispered, "You lucky girl, inheriting such a mansion." A month after we moved into the grand house, I was still figuring out which light switches worked which lights when the doorbell rang one sunny Saturday morning. There stood Mrs. Thompson, her face set in determination, suitcases flanking her feet like loyal pets. "Robin, I've made a decision. I'm moving in. Gave up my apartment lease and everything," she announced without waiting for an invitation. I blinked, taken aback. What? Just like that?" She pushed past me into the foyer, her suitcases trailing. "Yes, just like that. This house is big enough for family, and where else would I be but with my son and you?" Tom, hearing the commotion, came down the stairs. "Mom? What's going on?" Mrs. Thompson smiled at Tom, all sweet and motherly. "Just think, Tom. I can help around, cook meals, be part of your everyday lives." Tom looked from her to me, clearly in a bind. Robin, it could be good. Mom's great around the house, and you know how busy we are. She could help out. I knew arguing in the moment was pointless. They were family, after all. All right, but we set some ground rules. This is our home, Mrs. Thompson. Your home too, now, but ours first. Of course, dear. You won't even notice I'm here, she chirped, already directing where to put her suitcases. The first few days were an adjustment. Mrs. Thompson took over the kitchen like a general leading her troops. Breakfasts were hearty, dinners were three-course meals, and the scent of baking became a constant. It wasn't all bad, though. Coming home to a cooked meal after a day of number crunching was a relief, I had to admit. Mrs. Thompson's takeover of our home wasn't gradual, it hit like a storm. A month into her living with us, she dropped another bomb. One morning, while I was still rubbing sleep from my eyes, she cornered me at the coffee machine with a bright, unsettling grin. "Robin, I've got news. I quit the bakery," she chirped, as if she'd just won the lottery. I nearly spit out my coffee. "You what? Why?" "Sweetie, I'm going all in on my own business. I'll be baking right here, taking custom orders for cakes and pastries." Isn't that great? This kitchen is a dream. Before I knew it, my once tranquil haven transformed into a bustling bakery shop. The kitchen counters, where I used to sip my morning coffee in peace, were now perpetually dusted with flour and cluttered with baking tools. The living room, my favorite spot to unwind after a long day's work, became a showroom and waiting area for Mrs. Thompson's parade of clients. My weekends, previously my sacred downtime, were now interrupted by the constant ding-dong of the doorbell, as strangers came and went, sampling pastries and filling my living space with chatter and crumbs. Tom seemed oblivious to my growing frustration. His job as a construction manager paid well, and he made sure everyone knew it by the way he spent on himself. Designer suits, shiny, expensive shoes, and memberships to high-end clubs were his new normal. One evening, as I tried to find a quiet corner in my own living room, Tom waltzed in, flaunting another shopping bag from some upscale boutique. "Check this out, Robin. Got myself another pair of those Italian leather shoes. On sale, but still a bit of a splurge," he said, his face lit up with a boyish glee. I glanced at the bag, feeling the pinch of our skewed financial priorities. "Tom, we talked about this. We need to save, not splurge. How many shoes does one guy need?" He shrugged, his smile fading. "I earn good money, Robin. Why shouldn't I enjoy it? Can't you just be supportive?" Supportive was becoming a tall order. The next day, Tom approached me with another brilliant idea, his eyes avoiding mine. "Robin, I was thinking, I need a proper place to store my suits and shoes. What about turning the guest room into my personal closet?" I stared at him, incredulous. "You want a whole room? Just for your clothes and shoes?" "Yeah, why not? Keep things organized and neat. It'll be fine," he reasoned, as if the matter was already decided. I shook my head, feeling the walls of my own house closing in on me. "It's not fine, Tom. None of this is fine. Your mom's business is taking over our house, and now you want to turn it into some sort of bachelor pad with fancy closets. Where do I fit into all this?" Tom paused, the joviality fading from his face as he realized the gravity of my frustration. I didn't think it was bothering you this much." "Clearly," I sighed, walking away to find some semblance of peace in what little space of the house still felt like mine. Saturday mornings in our house used to be about lazy starts, strong coffee, and maybe a stroll in the nearby park. That was until Mrs. Thompson decided our home was also the perfect venue for her bakery's open days. Now, it's more like a bakery showcase, complete with strangers milling about and every room filled with noise. One Saturday, I trudged downstairs, greeted by the scent of fresh pastry and a living room so crowded you'd think we were hosting a concert. Mrs. Thompson was in her element, flitting between guests with trays of treats, her laughter almost too loud over the chatter. "Robin, dear, come and meet everyone. They just love the croissants I baked this morning," she called out, not noticing my discomfort. I forced a smile, waving at the crowd. Hi, yeah, enjoy the food, I muttered, slipping through to the kitchen to escape. It was all too much. My home had turned into a public space, and I felt like a stranger in it. By mid-afternoon, the noise hadn't died down. I found Mrs. Thompson leading a group through the hallway, proudly narrating the history of the house as if it were a museum piece. And this lovely archway? All original woodwork. I watched, my jaw tightening, as they peeked into my private study, a place once off limits. That was the last straw. Mrs. Thompson, can we talk? In private? I asked, pulling her aside into the study. She blinked, her face a picture of innocence. Of course, dear. What's on your mind? I shut the door, keeping my voice low but firm. This has to stop. The open days, the tours. This is our home, not a bakery showroom. Her smile faltered, replaced by a crease of annoyance between her brows. Stop? But why? Everyone's having such a wonderful time. And it's good for business. It's not good for me, for us. I can't even relax in my own house. It's crowded, noisy, I didn't sign up for this, I argued, feeling my patience fray. Her eyes narrowed, a sharp edge slicing through her usual warmth. I see. Well, maybe Tom needs to hear about this. About how unsupportive his wife is. Are you threatening me? I couldn't believe this was the same woman who'd sweetly offered me pastries years ago. If necessary, I'll do what I must to protect my interests. And Tom will understand, after all, he's my son, she retorted, her words like daggers. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just about the bakery anymore, it was a power play. Fine, I conceded, my heart sinking. Keep your open days. But stay out of my study, that's my space. Mrs. Thompson smiled, a tight, triumphant curve to her lips. Of course, dear. I'm glad we could agree. As she left, the sound of laughter and clinking dishes filtered back through the door. I leaned against it, feeling defeated. Was this what family was supposed to be like? The tension in the house had been building like a storm cloud ready to burst, and burst it did. One particularly taxing day, I came home to find Mrs. Thompson in the kitchen, gossiping with one of her friends. I was barely in the door when I overheard her say, Robin practically lives off of us. I'm the one bringing in the real dough. Stunned and fuming, I stormed into the kitchen. Really, Mrs. Thompson? Because last I checked, I'm the one paying for everything around here. Her friend scurried out, leaving us to face off. Mrs. Thompson's face hardened. I keep this family fed and happy. That's more than I can say for you, dear. Her words stung, but I swallowed the hurt. Cooking doesn't pay the utilities, Mrs. Thompson. I do. She scoffed, turning her back to me as if I'd said nothing of consequence. Things came to a head during a family dinner some days later. The air was thick with tension, each clink of cutlery sounding like a tiny alarm bell. Mrs. Thompson had cooked, sure, but the meal was overshadowed by her simmering discontent. As we were eating, she slammed her fork down and looked straight at me. I need money to expand my business. It's time to open a proper bakery, and I want your financial support. I paused, my fork halfway to my mouth. Your business? Mrs. Thompson, we've been over this. I can't fund your bakery. Her face turned a shade of red I'd only seen on overripe tomatoes. Ungrateful. After all I do here, feeding you, keeping this house afloat? Keeping the house afloat? I echoed, incredulous. I've supported this household on my own. Maybe you should consider a loan if you need funding. That set her off. In a flash, she reached over and snatched the plate right out of my hands, her eyes blazing. You don't deserve to eat the food I make. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. This is my house, Mrs. Thompson. You live here under my generosity. Don't you dare speak to me like that. All eyes turned to Tom, who had been silent until now. Finally, he spoke, and his words cut deeper than any knife. Mom's right, Robin. Why can't you just help her? She's family. I stared at him, disbelief and betrayal swirling in the pit of my stomach. Tom, are you hearing yourself? Your mom's running a business out of our home without contributing a dime to our expenses, and you want me to finance her even more? He didn't back down. She's my mother, Robin. She deserves our support. The room spun a little as I processed his words. Your mother, I repeated slowly, the realization bitter on my tongue. And what about your wife? Where do I stand in this equation? There was a heavy silence, broken only by Mrs. Thompson's huffing. If you're not with us, you're against us, she muttered, venom in her tone. I looked from her to Tom, the distance between us more profound than the length of the table. I think I need some air, I said quietly, my voice nearly breaking. I staggered away from the table, barely making it to the living room before my knees buckled. Tom rushed over, his earlier anger replaced with concern. Robin, what's wrong? Are you okay? I shook my head, unable to speak through the waves of nausea and dizziness. Tom's voice, now edged with panic, seemed distant as he dialed for an ambulance. In the blur of sirens and paramedics, words like hypertension and stress floated around me. But it wasn't until a kind young paramedic gently suggested a pregnancy test that the real shock came. Positive. I was pregnant. Tom, who had been a bundle of nerves, broke into a huge, relieved smile when he heard the news. A baby! We're going to have a baby, Robin. His joy was infectious, even in the chaos, and for a moment, all the disputes seemed trivial. I'm sorry for everything earlier, truly. We'll fix this, he murmured, squeezing my hand as we headed to the hospital. Despite his newfound enthusiasm, Mrs. Thompson's demeanor hardly shifted. She remained cold, her congratulations stiff and forced. Determined to mend the fractured family dynamics, especially now with a baby on the way, I proposed a trip. Let's go on a trip, I suggested one morning. It might be good for us to get away. Mrs. Thompson, always keen on anything culinary, perked up. She pointed at the brochure of a national food festival in one of the countries spread on the kitchen table. Let's go to South America. This festival is famous. It could give me some new ideas, she said, flipping through the brochure with a rare flicker of approval in her eyes. So, I booked the tickets and chose the best hotel I could find, hoping luxury might smooth the remaining tension. However, the trip soured from the start. On the plane, Mrs. Thompson complained about everything from the flight duration to the turbulence. This is intolerable. How much longer? She grumbled, her voice loud enough for nearby passengers to glance over. Tom, trying to play mediator, only nodded along with her complaints, his earlier promises to support me seemingly forgotten. Upon arrival, the luxury hotel that looked so promising online was met with immediate criticism. This is what you booked? The service is atrocious, Mrs. Thompson declared as we checked in, her nose wrinkled in disdain. The culinary festival, the centerpiece of our trip, further fueled their dissatisfaction. This is nothing special. We could have stayed home for this, Mrs. Thompson complained after a day of tasting and exploring. Tom, echoing her every sentiment, spent more time soothing his mother's grievances than enjoying what the festival had to offer. Feeling increasingly isolated and unwell from the pregnancy, I retreated to our hotel room for the remainder of the trip, while they ventured out, spending lavishly, my money providing them with pleasures they didn't bother to appreciate. Returning to the hotel after another lackluster excursion around the city, Mrs. Thompson stormed into her room where I was basking under the cool air conditioner. You know, Robin, you've really brought us here for nothing, she snapped as soon as she saw me. Your constant sickness, all this nausea, you're just ruining this trip. I sat up, bracing myself against the wave of dizziness. But you wanted to come to this festival. I paid for this whole trip from my own personal. She cut me off, grabbing my wrist with a surprising strength, her nails digging into my skin. I don't care. Just go back home and stop ruining our vacation." With a forceful push, she shoved me out of the room and slammed the door in my face. Shaken, I returned to the room I shared with Tom, only to find my suitcase waiting outside the door. Confused and hurt, I knocked, and the door cracked open just enough for Tom to peer out, his expression hard and unsympathetic. "Robin, this isn't working. You're always sick, and it's exhausting. I can't handle this anymore," he said coldly. The door slammed shut, and I was left alone in the hallway, my suitcase beside me. With tears blurring my vision, I gathered my documents and belongings, leaving the hotel behind. During the flight home, my discomfort grew into acute pain, my stomach cramping severely. As soon as the plane touched down, I rushed to the hospital where the devastating news was confirmed: I had lost the baby. Recovering in the hospital, my phone was a constant buzz with missed calls from Mrs. Thompson. With a heavy heart, I called her back, not ready for another confrontation, but knowing I couldn't ignore her forever. "Robin, where have you been? Listen, we've been robbed at the hotel. They took everything, our money, our passports. We're stuck, and it's your fault. You need to fix this." Her voice was frantic, accusing. "I'm in the hospital," I said slowly, the weight of my own words sinking in. "I had a miscarriage." There was a pause on the other end, and then, "That doesn't matter right now. They've put us in jail after a misunderstanding at the hotel. You need to get us out of this mess." Her words struck me like a physical blow. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Before I could respond, Tom took the phone from his mother. "Look, Robin, just do what you need to do to get us back. What happened to you? It's not as important as you think." His words chilled me to the core. "Not important? Tom, we lost our child." "Yeah, well, we need you to focus and help us now," he insisted, his voice devoid of any warmth. That was the moment everything became crystal clear. The lack of empathy, the selfishness, it was all laid bare. "I'm not going to help," I stated flatly. "You and your mother figure it out." Hanging up, I turned off my phone, the silence in my hospital room enveloping me. In that moment, something within me shifted, a deep, irreversible decision made. After being discharged from the hospital, I went straight home, the silence of the empty house both eerie and soothing. I drafted and signed the divorce papers, a symbolic severing of the ties that had bound me to a life of disappointment and betrayal. I then began the laborious process of gathering all the belongings of Tom and his mother. I piled their clothes, the luxurious suits, the baking paraphernalia, everything that reminded me of the past few tumultuous months, into boxes, and took them to a storage unit nearby. My next step was changing the locks on all the doors. 2 months slipped by, the routine of work providing a comforting rhythm to my days. Then, one dreary afternoon, I heard a key jangling unsuccessfully at the front door. Curious, I peered through the window and saw Tom and Mrs. Thompson on the doorstep. They looked worn and defeated, their clothes shabby and dirty. I opened the door, keeping the chain latched. Tom's face was a mixture of surprise and anger as he tried his key again. "It's not working, Robin. What's going on?" he demanded, his voice edgy. "The locks have been changed," I stated plainly, feeling an odd sense of detachment. Mrs. Thompson piped up, her voice harsh. "You can't just lock us out, Robin. This is Tom's home too." "Not anymore. Your belongings are in a storage unit down the street. Here's the number," I said, handing over a slip of paper through the narrow opening. Tom's eyes widened, a mix of shock and realization dawning on him. "What are you saying, Robin? You're kicking us out?" I held up the divorce papers. "I am saying it's over, Tom. Here are the divorce papers. You can have your lawyer look them over." He snatched the papers, scanning them quickly. "You can't do this to me. I'll claim half of the house. It's mine too. The house was left to me by my grandmother. You have no claim over it," I replied firmly, every word reinforcing my boundaries. With a final look of defiance, I closed the door. They found a place in a rented apartment, a far cry from the comforts they once knew. Mrs. Thompson returned to working as a saleswoman at a bakery, and Tom, having been fired due to his extended absence, took up a job as a taxi driver. As for me, I returned to my work with a new vigor. The loneliness of the big house felt less daunting each day, filled instead with possibilities and new beginnings.